Paolo again for cutting down his slides to a much shorter presentation. Okay, we're going to move on now to another representative for the manufacturing side. Doug Johnson is Senior Director of Policy and International Affairs for the Consumer Electronic Association in the US. He's going to talk about how manufacturers are addressing the energy efficiency challenge in end-user devices.
Thank you, Sheridan. A note about CEA, the Consumer Electronics Association is a high-tech trade association based near Washington, D.C. We represent about 2,200 companies. Essentially, the companies that design, make, and sell the end-user products that keep us informed, connected, and entertained. It's a growing industry. It's projected to be on a global scale of $668 billion this year. But when I say consumer electronics, I mean essentially all those devices, whether they're handheld, home office, home entertainment products, wired, wireless, that you find in the home or in your local electronics store for the consumer. The market, no surprise to many of you, obviously, is very dynamic, competitive, subject to constant changes, innovation, changes from one technology to another, very rapid innovation, very rapid pace. So when it comes to energy efficiency, the key question is, what is the best way to address energy efficiency and conservation for an industry that's always changing and products converging and so forth? And we believe it's actually a combination of several different things, and this is the way we've been addressing energy efficiency at the Consumer Electronics Association with our member companies. First and foremost, from a policy perspective, voluntary market-oriented programs are the way to go. And they've certainly proven to be very effective in the US market, and we are certainly encouraging the European Commission to adopt Energy Star for consumer electronics. It's in place for IT products, as you heard earlier, but we believe there's a large policy gap in the EU in that consumer electronics, there is no Energy Star program for consumer electronics in Europe. We're focusing on research and analysis, and I'll talk about a couple of studies we did recently relative to our products' energy use. Industry standards plays a role. I'll talk about that. I'll touch on consumer education initiatives and also efforts to promote and reach out to third-party groups. Energy Star, we heard a little bit about that with regard to IT products. There are several advantages, certainly to the Energy Star approach and its ability to keep pace with the industry and set specifications that over time transform the market to more energy efficient products. Strong participation by manufacturers, well supported by government. It's a good public-private partnership, and it's certainly well recognized by consumers. More than 70% of consumers in the United States recognize the Energy Star logo at the point of sale. As far as achievements go, very strong. Again, for the product categories covered by Energy Star, electronics are really the success story, whether you're looking at consumer electronics, including residential office equipment, or also office equipment as a separate category. Very strong savings figures for energy as well as reduced emissions. Energy Star has never been more active than it has in the past 12 months, with specifications recently completed for digital televisions, set-top boxes, external power supplies, and revision efforts underway for the specs related to computers, monitors, and imaging equipment. So again, we believe this is the best practices policy approach for addressing energy efficiency. We do not support minimum energy performance standards. We feel that that's a constraint on innovation and product convergence. Energy Star gives the flexibility that the market needs and that ultimately consumers appreciate in their devices. As far as data goes, we noticed weaknesses in data that were used by our policymakers as they were considering the energy use of our sector. And so we undertook an effort last year to essentially take a census of energy use for all the significant energy-using product categories in consumer electronics. And that study was completed last year. It covers really more than 90% of energy use for our sector in the home. And obviously our objective was to get good data out there for policymakers and other groups interested in this sector. It was a bottom-up approach where we took into account operating modes, consumer usage, et cetera. And we found that with regard to consumer electronics, we fit in at about 12%. That is, all of our products together in the home represent about 12% of electricity use, residential electricity use in the United States. And put at a national level, we represent about 4.4% of electricity use. The findings, no surprise, energy use has gone up in some categories, certainly as a result of usage. More people are watching television for longer periods. More people are using personal computers. There's positive trends as well in that standby power has decreased dramatically over the years. As I mentioned, more products are in use. Energy use has gone up, but so has efficiency. Efficiency has improved across many different product categories, and we feel that a strong outcome of this study is a demonstration of the effectiveness of voluntary market-oriented approaches. We do plan on renewing this study about every 3 years. That seems to make sense for our industry and will allow us to benchmark ourselves over time, and the full report is available at that website. An additional study we did, once we quantified how much energy our products use in a direct way, we wanted then to understand the savings potential of using electronics in a couple of different ways, including for telecommuting or teleworking, as well as e-commerce activities. And in this case, we found some very positive findings for telecommuting in that the estimated almost 4 million telecommuters in the United States reduced gasoline consumption by about 840 million gallons while curbing CO2 emissions by nearly 14 million metric tons. And that's equivalent to removing 2 million vehicles from the road every year. So a very positive finding for the use of consumer ICTs and the ICT infrastructure, obviously, for telecommuting. And translating that back into electricity, that's roughly the amount of electricity used by 1 million US households during the year. For e-commerce, of course, we're talking about the downloading of electronic goods. In fact, we found the strongest positive story in the downloading of electronic goods as opposed to traditional commerce where you're going to a retail store to buy goods. And there we took a look at the potential, especially in the area of video on demand, and found that if really half of all current video and DVD rentals transitioned to video on demand, this would result in the equivalent of 2.4 billion kilowatt hours of energy savings, which is roughly equivalent to 200,000 US households' electricity consumption during the year. So conclusions for the study, certainly ICTs allow workers and consumers to save energy and reduce emissions in everyday ways. And then when you scale this, when you take it together and then look at the national picture, there are some very strong positive stories. Industry standards play a role. As I mentioned earlier, the industry has set standards for measuring the energy consumption recently of digital televisions. A new standard was needed in that area, and the IEC took charge of that with a standard setting committee, and then CEA recently completed a measurement standard relative to set-top boxes. Again, two major energy-using product categories in the consumer electronics realm. And the advantages of the industry standards approach, I know many of you are familiar with it, but it is open to all stakeholders. It does provide a credible and flexible environment to develop standards, which oftentimes are taken to the international level. We have also paid attention to consumer education, launching a website last year called mygreenelectronics.org, at which we've put information relative to consumer electronics energy use in the form of an energy consumption calculator where you can identify what products you have in the home, about how often you use them, and then understand in terms of watts and dollars how much it costs to power those products. There are also energy savings tips there as well. Our own trade show, the International Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, that takes place every year in early January, has also become a venue for highlighting and promoting energy-efficient products and technologies. It is also a venue at which we reward with an eco-design award the top performers in the area of energy efficiency and eco-design. Currently, we're pursuing 3 major initiatives. The first certainly is to come up with a way of informing consumers on a model-specific basis how much energy their products use. We have the broad figures now. We'd like to disclose that on products. It's a challenge, but certainly doable, and we're working on a common approach for conveying this information, whether it's in the form of a label, online disclosure, or other means. It's also very important that we have standard ways of measuring energy use. As I mentioned, we've done that recently with televisions and set-top boxes, and we're making sure that we have adequate and up-to-date test procedures for all relevant categories. And then finally, industry has completed energy efficiency design principles, which will certainly be promulgated and promoted as well. There are several opportunities for collaboration, we feel, certainly in the area of standards and harmonized approaches. Whether it's the Energy Star program or another voluntary market-oriented program, there are opportunities to harmonize these approaches. There are opportunities to harmonize the measurement standards. That's very important. In the case of external power supplies that was mentioned earlier, there we feel an efficiency standard set by government is appropriate. These are simple charging devices as opposed to more complex end-user devices. So we favor a harmonized approach to external power supplies. Going forward, again, we plan on continuing to quantify the energy consumption of our industry so we understand the trends We are partnering with others who want to do similar studies in their markets, and we're certainly open to a collaboration with other countries and trade groups and governments who want to do the same. Consumer education, again, very important, and we feel we have a good approach to that we can also share. In fact, there's interest in translating that website into different languages as well that I mentioned earlier. Electric utility rebates, a relatively new idea, but we're talking to utilities who want to use utility rebates traditionally used for white goods and apply those to our industry. So they're thinking of ways of incentivizing the sale of energy efficient products and rewarding certainly companies and retailers that provide them. And then finally, I think a big project for this year is energy use disclosures. We want to deliver a solution to our government in the United States. At the same time, we want to collaborate with our European partners and provide the same to the European Commission. We feel we have a unique opportunity for collaboration on something that would be beneficial to both markets, helpful for commerce, and ultimately helpful for consumers. Our global position, not a surprise, we support voluntary market-oriented programs that can keep pace with technology. We're concerned about mandatory limits, artificial constraints in technology. We feel there's a better path to achieving the goal of energy efficiency and conservation. So the best practices for consumer electronics and user devices really can be summed up as these public-private partnerships such as Energy Star, as well as standards and test procedures developed by industry, consumer education, and then again, energy use disclosures on products. Thank you very much for your attention.